What was the creepiest or most paranormal thing that's ever happened to you? I dropped my mug onto the floor accidentally. Heard no noise when it hit the floor. Go to pick it up and it's gone. I honestly went to bed and pondered what happened and slept feeling incredibly uncomfortable. Edit. Jesus Christ, this kicked off more than expected. Obligatory thanks for the gold. And alas, I never did find the mug. Still bothers me to this day. When I was in college I house sat for my parents. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat, so I locked every door leading up to the bedroom when I went to bed at night. I had the weirdest dream that someone unlocked each door and turned on every light. I felt cold and woke up to my dog barking. All of the lights in the house were on and every door open and unlocked. My dog wouldn't stop barking at nothing in the hallway. I sat in the shower with my dog and I phoned the rest of night scared to death. My grandmother's house had a very distinct smell. Nothing bad though. Just a grandmother's house smell. Anyway, when she came to visit us she always used to sit in a specific chair in the living room. Shortly after she passed away my father, my older sister and myself came home, and when we walked into the living room and we all smelled her, my dad said hello Ethel and the smell disappeared. I would be skeptical if just one of us experienced this, but it was all three of us. One afternoon in college I came back from classes and decided to sit on the couch and have a snack. After that I just passed out. I had a nightmare of some bloody-faced demonish thing screaming in my ear at the top of its lungs. Woke up and went about the rest of my day. My roommate comes back later that night and goes into his room as I'm sitting in the main living area. At some point he lets out this random startled scream which leads to me running down the hall to see what's going on. He looks at me and goes, I swear to God someone with a bloody face just walked from your bedroom into the bathroom. I never told him about my nightmare I had earlier in the day. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Nothing ever happened again. My brother and I were home alone one night watching TV. My mother was working a night shift and father was out. Father came home and pushed the door ajar and poked his head through to say hello. We both turned around and say hello back. Father closed door. 30 seconds after, another man opens the door to say hello. We both turn around and say hello back. Man closes door. We assume a friend of my father has come back to the house too. Anyway, about 5 minutes later I head into the kitchen where my father was making dinner or whatever, and I'm expecting to see his friend again. I see that he's alone making dinner and assumed his friend was upstairs in the bathroom. I ask my father who his friend is. My father looks at me and asks me what friend. I reply, the guy who came back with you. Dad looks at me thinking I'm some sort of weirdo. He says I came back home on my own. Biggest what I've ever experienced. My brother was freaked out to the maximum. Remembering the man's face, he was pale looking and bright white hair. When I was about 5 or 6, I was sitting on the back deck of my family home, an old farmhouse. I remember this old lady walking up the steps and going straight into the house without acknowledging me. I follow her inside to see who it is, and my mom is standing in the kitchen room right off the back deck. I ask her who's here and she gives this confused look. Around that time, the original owner of the farmhouse died, and I am 100% convinced it was her. Somewhat ironically, something happened to me last night. I got home from work very early in the morning, 2:30 AM. My house has an entryway or mudroom before you actually get into the house. I open the front door, step inside, close front door and proceed to try and find the key to get through the next door to get into my house. So the only light in this entryway is through the glass on the front door. The rest of the room is completely black and I can barely see my hands in front of my face. All of a sudden I start to hear this buzzing, vibrating noise behind me off to the right. House is old, so maybe just weird house noises. Still looking for the key when I notice that the noise is getting louder, closer, and it has risen in pitch to something like if a woman was humming loudly. Maybe it's just ringing in my ear. Out of the corner of my eye I see a shadow that I thought was from light reflecting outside move towards me, creeping along the wall. That's when I noticed the vibrating noise was also getting closer to me, and it seemed to be coming in the same direction as the now moving shadow. I'm wetting my pants trying to open this damn door, and when I finally do, the noise stops. The shadow disappears, and I'm hoping it was all in my head. My boyfriend and I woke up in separate parts of the house in hysterics. naked and covered in sweat. When we both finally calmed down and talked, we realized we had the same dream of being surrounded by a group of black and white people with no mouths. My grandfather passed away when I was 8 and my little brother was 2 or 3ish. He had this big laserboy chair in the living room that he always planted himself in. Everyone knew this chair was Grandpa's chair. Anyway, we went down to my grandparents' house in Florida for a long weekend to attend the funeral, etc. We're all chatting the first night there in the living room, and my mom was sitting in the laserboy chair. My little brother goes up to my mom and says Grandpa wants his chair back. My mom asks him where Grandpa is, thinking he probably didn't understand death. To which he responds, he's right behind you. My mom bolted off that sofa immediately. A lady's voice coming from my closet asking for help. My closet door was cracked and she said, help me, I see you through the cracks. Every synonym for the word scared was coursing through my body. I went and checked to see if there was a woman in need of help, but nothing was in there but my clothes and shoes. March 2015. My father passed a month or so earlier. I wasn't sleeping well. I would be up later and later at night. My father used to always give me it for staying up so late because it's ruining my sleep schedule and affecting my work. Standard parenting stuff. It's about 2:30 AM and I'm watching YouTube on my PS4. Power in the house flickers. I check the window. No rain or wind or anything. I figured somebody hit a pole somewhere. Couple minutes later, power goes out for a second. Comes right back on. Nothing was affected. Which is weird because when power goes out, electronics reset. Check the window again. Still nothing happening outside. A couple minutes later, power goes out for almost a whole minute. From the couch, I can see the street light outside is still lit, as well as the other houses on the street. Power comes back on and everything is still as it was. Video continues where it left off. Clocks haven't reset. Nothing. It's now 2:37 AM. I audibly said okay and went to bed. Next morning I wake up for work. The clock on the oven says 11 something am. My phone says 7:23. It was around 11 when my father left the house the day he passed. Fast forward to January of this year. 3-year anniversary of my father's passing. I can't sleep. I'm upstairs of my new home, watching Netflix. Power flickers and goes out. I immediately said okay, I'm going to bed. Power comes back on. Next morning, getting ready for work. Oven clock says 11:41 AM. Dad doesn't like when I stay up too late. Edit. Learned the difference between affect and effect. Not sure if paranormal or not, but I have a weird warning system that functions without any obvious triggers. For example, once I hiked through the forest to some old castle on a hill. To get there, I needed to cross a bridge that goes over a 20-meter deep canyon. I've been there 1,000 times, as I used to live in the area. This particular time I started to get a weird feeling as soon as I stepped into the forest. It got stronger and stronger until it was pure fear. I thought I must have eaten something wrong or so, because there was no reason whatsoever to be afraid. So I tried to ignore it and went on. Right before I stepped onto the bridge, that weird feeling acted up so wildly I almost turned back. Again, I convinced myself that I was being stupid and made it to the middle of the bridge. One is quite a nice view from that position into forest and the rock formations below. So as always I stopped and looked down to the right side of the bridge. Then I turned to the left, but before I could look down, that feeling didn't let me. At that point I really thought that I must go crazy. But still I obeyed. Didn't look down and made my way to the castle ruin complex that started right behind the bridge. Been there for 15 minutes. When some police officers arrived, started to scream at me to come down. As I was climbing the old walls, interrogated me who I was, what I did there, who I saw on my way to the castle, how long I have been there, and how come I didn't see the dead guy under the bridge, on the left side. So apparently he jumped shortly before I arrived, and I guess they thought I was involved or a suicide buddy of him and was about to jump from the ruin walls. Turns out I can sense dead people, or whatever. I had a couple experiences with that warning system. Weird. Edit. Here's the German Wikipedia of those ruins. There's also pictures of the bridge. Edit 2. Some of you asked about other instances of my warning system. Here are 2 more. 1. I went for a walk outside my rural village. Parked my car at a parking spot for hikers and realized a guy was sitting in one of the parked cars, smoking a cigarette. He was in 40s I guess. Looked like a solid guy. Nothing creepy. Could have been my dad. So I get out of my car, start my walk among the fields, and again I have that super weird feeling telling me to go home. Again I'm arguing with myself. So in the distance I see a guy walking around, always parallel to me. That's it, I think. He's giving me the creeps. But he's so far away, there's no chance he could be a threat. I continue my walk, fighting that weird feeling until it becomes so urgent that it feels as if I'm walking against a resistance in the air or something. It was incredible. So I turn around, walk all the way back, checking on that guy in the distance from time to time. I was gone for 40 minutes probably, when I could see my car again between the trees. Also I see that dad figure is still there, doing something to my car. That's not good, especially because it's getting dark. He sees me coming, bolts to his car and drives off. My door handle was jizzed all over. 2. One evening I get, out of nowhere, a very strong urge to check on my friend. She lived in the basement flat of her parents' house and had been battling with some chronic infection. So I knew she wasn't very fit at that point. This super strong feeling that I should check on her is becoming urgent. This time I do not argue much. Her phone is constantly off. So I drive to her flat and knock on her door. No answer. But the door is locked. I'm a rather shy person. So if I get the slightest idea that I might be unwelcome, I will not stay. But this weird pushing feeling almost screams inside of me to get into that flat. So I knock and yell until I hear some movement. My friend somehow managed to drag herself to the door and unlock it. She had a severe toxic shock resulting from an undetected mold sensitivity. Turns out her flat was infested. I ran upstairs and fetched her dad. He had to literally pick her up and carry her up the stairs. No one told me she was in that state. She could go silent for days. Introvert. So this time my warning system was pushing me, not holding me back. Weird. Edit 3. Thank you for the gold. I was sleeping in my basement, pretty much my bedroom, and I woke up at some random time in the night for no reason. Rolled over and saw a black figure, probably around 5 feet 10 inches and typical male physique, standing at the side of my bed. It was standing between the bed and the stairs, so there was no way to nope out. I just rolled over and straight up started praying. I rolled back over and it was gone. The next morning I was in the shower, also in the basement, and the curtain was pushed to the side. Not like all the way, but it noticeably moved. Then when I got out of the shower, my cello's D string was plucked 3 times then wrung out, which was laying against my chair in the basement. Then I went upstairs and my brother had a handprint that reached across his neck and cheek. It was too big to be his hand, but he was perfectly fine and he slept through the night uninterrupted. 20 or so years ago, while living in NM, driving east on HWY 60 at night between Vaughan and FT Sumner, 2 of us in the car and noticed a really bright light on the right rear side. I mean really bright. We then remembered that the train tracks were there, so we kept driving without really thinking about it. Well, the light stayed with us, which was weird because trains usually don't go that fast out there. So then my friend rolls down the window and look back to see WTH it is, and suddenly the light vanishes. Also no sound. So now we're a little freaked. We pull over to check things out. Well, a new realization sets in. There are no train tracks next to the road on this section of road. 34.486698 minus 104.776733. So now we're really freaked out and bolt out of our ASAP. We told our story to people at work and of course caught some grief, but that's what happened to us. Edit. Sorry, can't get map link to work using my phone. In the house I grew up in, it always felt like you were being watched. I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye and dark mists that would dissolve when you looked straight at them. My older sister was always scared of the attic. Especially, she would barricade the door when we were left home alone. I went in the attic quite often to get various things. It's where we kept large toy containers, old clothes and stuffed animals, and I just liked seeing what I could find. It always felt like I was being watched, though. One time I went up there, and as I reached the top of the stairs, I saw large, translucent alien-shaped white head looking at me from behind a box. I froze, terrified, and locked eyes with it for a few seconds before it slowly lowered itself down to hide. I turned right back around and left, telling myself I had imagined it, but scared to go in the attic for years after that. I didn't tell anyone for years. My parents eventually sold the house and we moved, and I've never felt the same way anywhere else I've lived. I used to have this reoccurring nightmare about this lizard man type monster who could see what I could see out of my eyes. So I'd run and hide and he didn't know where I was. But then as soon as I peeked to see if it was safe, he'd know where I was. So I'd have to leave that hiding spot and go find a new one, and then it would happen over and over and over again. A literal nightmare. Very Kafkaesque. But here is the real spooky part. I once mentioned the lizard man to my dad, and he got super white in the face and his voice was all shaky and he just said, "This dream took place at our house in East St. Paul, the one with the apartments right behind it?" And I said yes. That's where I'd always go to hide. "How did you know that?" And he said, "Because I have the exact same dream." And I don't know if it was just the way he said it or just the overall situation or both, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. It's quite chilling. At a nursing home, working 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. First, I took care of 16 ladies as a CNA on night duty, on my own. The halls have 16 rooms, with a sister hall, same layout, next door, only separated by a sliding door. There's a nurse that oversees the 2 adjoining halls but never saw her much, so it got lonely. As it was a nursing home, the ladies who live there are older and can get really sick really fast. One lady was sent to the hospital for pneumonia and was gone 4 days. One night, around 3 a.m, another lady, same hall neighbor to the lady at the hospital, started screaming, "Get him out of my room." Thinking a male resident had wandered from the other side of the building, I ran over to her room, but I didn't see anything. Now, this is a lady who is very with it and never has behaviors or hollers out, but she is hysterical. I figure she had a bad dream and try to calm her down. It took about 15 minutes. When I leave her room, the nurse is on the phone. The lady at the hospital had died 15 minutes ago. There are ghosts that walk the halls, and dark forms I see in certain corners of certain halls. So I guess I was never really alone. The very first hotel that I worked at, I started at the front desk and worked 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift. There was someone there with me from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So I always had a little more than an hour where I was alone at the desk. Our kitchen closed at 10 p.m. so usually by 10:15 p.m. it was only the bartender and I still there. One night, it was almost 11 p.m. and there was a huge noise that came from the kitchen area. The bartender and I ran back there and saw that every single pot, pan, ladle, spoon, everything else that was hanging from the ceiling racks were on the ground. After our shift, we watched the camera back and there was no one in the kitchen when it happened. I have no explanation for it other than it was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me and I could not get out of there fast enough. When I was in HS, my little friend's parents would let me stay overnight on the weekend so long as I slept in their RV that was parked in back of the house. I had done it multiple times. My girlfriend would come sit outside with me for a while until she got tired and then she would go inside to fall asleep and I would listen to my Walkman while I tried to fall asleep. I remember one night I was having trouble falling asleep, which wasn't so unusual for me, but as I lay there I started to notice an unfamiliar background sound noise, and when I removed my headphone I realized that it sounded like people outside the RV were having a loud discussion. But the number of voices started to multiply and get louder and louder until it was unbearable. I searched round and round peering out the windows but nobody was there. I was very shaken at this point and I decided to run into the house and sleep in the living room and try to explain myself in the morning. Problem was, every time I got about 6 feet away from the RV there would be a flash of white and I would open my eyes and find myself back in the RV. Now I was nearly having a panic attack, so I called my girlfriend on the phone and she could hear how terrified I was, so she told me she was coming outside to get me. I heard the backsliding door of her house open. I heard her walk across the deck, down the steps, across the garden stones, and finally her hand fumble on the RV door. But when it swung open and no one was there, Now I was pretty much in tears when suddenly felt the presence of something behind me. I turned around and found this massive red aura hovering there, and I was overcome with this immense sense of death and dread, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like I was being strangled. I remember feeling like this aura energy was killing me. Like absorbing my life force, if that makes any sense. I dropped to my knees and realized that if I didn't break free real fast I was most certainly going to die. I don't know where I found the strength from, but I willed myself back to my feet and slammed the RV door open and bolted for the house. This time I actually got inside. I hollered for my girlfriend and she came downstairs with her mom to much confusion. I explained everything that had happened, getting especially angry that my girlfriend never came outside like she promised. She said that we never spoke on the phone and she had no idea what I was talking about. But when we compared our phones, mine showed a 125 conversation completed to phone while hers showed nothing. That's when her and her mom started taking me seriously and began to look quite scared themselves. The rest of the night was uneventful. Her mom let me try to sleep on the couch, but try as I might I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes I would see a small circle of intensely burning white light. I remember I was camping one time with friends from high school. We had decided to sleep around a fire, not inside of tents, since it would be nice to sleep under the stars. I fell asleep in the chair after a while, but I woke up to very loud screaming from the forest surrounding the campground. It sounded exactly like a friend of mine who was sleeping right by me, and I didn't see him in his chair anymore. I woke up the person next to me asking where he went, and then my friend who I thought was screaming was across sleeping elsewhere on a bench. I then went okay and fell asleep immediately. The next morning I was asking people about the screaming and nobody else heard it but me, and I'm not sure what made it. Sorry if bad formatting. Using mobile. Creepy for me. I was having a tense conversation with someone that I was close to years ago. The conversation quickly devolved into a passive-aggressive fight that ended with the other person getting in the car and driving away. As I started heading back inside, the other person came back, got out of the car, and started our conversation again. The tone of voice was totally different and the stance was different and the feeling in the air was completely off. I don't know how else to explain it. As the conversation progressed, the other person started saying some nasty and mean things that were completely out of character. I said, "This isn't like you, person." They said, "What makes you think that I'm person?" I remember continuing the conversation and talking to the person for a long time, but I don't remember anything specific. I do remember becoming more and more alarmed, knowing something wasn't right. Finally, I told the person to go home. They complied and left. I went back inside and started telling my sibling about the situation when the doorbell rang. Maybe 2-3 minutes had passed. It was the person coming back to apologize for the original fight. They had been driving around town for a long time and didn't want to go home, leaving things unresolved. I asked why they had said some of the things from the last conversation and they looked at me like I was crazy. They had no idea what I was talking about. Totally could have been lying. But that whole situation just felt dark. Scared the hell out of me. My great aunt, Mormor, was in a nursing home about a year ago. Her husband, Paw, had died back in 2012. They have been together since she was 19. And she was in her 90s. We would visit and unfortunately watch her get worse. There was a nurse that took my mother aside and told her, "This may sound crazy, but I am a sensitive and there has been this man standing in the corner of the room watching her. When I see this usually means she doesn't have long. Maybe 2 days at most." My mom calls me, tells me about it, and we rush to the nursing home to give her our goodbyes. After the last person visited her, she passed away. Sleep paralysis, or when I got sat on by a ghost while I was trying to sleep. I was driving to pick up my friend from the airport around 10 at night. His girlfriend was also with me as she wanted to see him as soon as possible. We were going down some dark, super lonely back road. I've never been that way before, but I was following good old Apple Maps. Eventually we came up alongside a train that was matched with our speed, so we couldn't see out past it on the right side of the car. After a couple minutes of that, we came upon a train yard on our left. A very spooky, very generic horror movie train yard. Nothing crazy yet, except for the fact that it went on and on and on. We probably spent 10 minutes driving at 45 miles an hour down a dark back road with a train yard on our left and a train on our right blocking the view. Eventually we made it back into society and picked up my friend from the airport. We told him all about the spooky train yard and train and were excited to drive back and show him just how much it was like a generic horror film. We drove back down the same roads. It wasn't there. We never passed a train yard. There were no trains on the tracks. Now on our left. Friend's girlfriend and I flipped out. We swore up and down we drove right along the train yard for a long time. The drive home felt much shorter. I'm a paranormal investigator, so I live for the creepy and paranormal. I seek it out. I've experienced a lot of creepy things. A while back we investigated the Sally house in Atchison, Kansas. This house is notorious for paranormal activity and the owners lease it to investigators. We'd already been there a few hours in the dark with no major incidents and had our equipment set up all over the place. We'd arranged toys on the floor in Sally's room. It's said that Sally will move them if you do that. We'd just finished a dinner break in the kitchen downstairs and went upstairs to check the equipment. When we got to the top of the stairs, the door to Sally's room was closed. None of us had closed it. Someone knocked on the door and asked, "Is anyone in there?" We heard a distinctly male voice say, "No, just leave." I need to point out, we were all downstairs together. No one had gone upstairs to close the door. But any investigator will tell you in old houses doors sometimes close. No men were upstairs. We had 2 men in our group. Both downstairs. Full stop. Not creepy, but definitely paranormal. I was about 17 and was in my bedroom crying my eyes out over something. Home could be difficult at times, and that evening I was really upset. I really needed someone to talk to, but the only phone in the house was downstairs where my parents were, so calling a friend wasn't an option. I didn't know what to do to deal with the crap I was trying to live with and really felt that it couldn't go on for much longer. I remember thinking, please, someone, just help me. Not a prayer as such. I'm not really sure if that does any good, more sort of a mental scream into the void. There was definitely no one in the room with me. It was a tiny room, and I had my back to a chest of drawers. And then I felt a something on my left shoulder, as if someone was standing behind me and resting their hand on me. I could feel the weight of each individual finger, and the palm cupping my shoulder, and I could feel warmth from it. It didn't scare me, but it was enough to stop me crying. I guess the feeling lasted for a minute or so and then just stopped. I have no idea what it was, but it was enough to calm me down. I wish I could feel it again.